And so I just said a prayer to the devil, and the next morning I woke up. I didn't feel different or anything, so I went to the corner store. I bought 6 lottery tickets, and I said, if they're all winners, I'll know that this is a real thing. They were all winners, so I was like, oh wow, so like, what are the odds of that? So I was like, wow, I guess my soul's gone, and I guess I'm living for the devil, and I guess God is real and the devil's real. So
Welcome to One Way Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Ariola, and today we have Chris Boteo with us, and
yeah,
coming in from Calallen. And so he's going to go ahead and tell us about his testimony. He's going to share everything God's been doing in his life, going to share a little bit how he grew up, and everything God's doing in his life. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
my name's Chris Boteo. My wife Jasmine Boteo. I got 3 sons: Samuel, Zane, and Josiah, and been saved now going on 10 years, living for God, and now pastoring, pioneering, going on about 5 years. And we actually came to church and found out about the church through my mom, who she isn't saved, and she wasn't saved when she invited us and told us to go to the Potter's house. And we actually ended up going there just one day because we missed service. So we ended up going there one day because we missed a service at the church I was attending, and so we hopped in there one day literally because I was in a walker and my wife was in crutches, and we had broken bones. So we literally hopped into the church, and Jeremiah Wacker was actually preaching when we went, and the message he was preaching pretty much our lives. So it really got a hold of us when we heard that message, because it was like he knew us. And so from that point on, it was just we just knew inside of us that was where we needed to be. And so from then on, we ended up a few months later, we got married in the church, and Jesus, we had a wedding there at church, and I think about 4 years in, maybe 4 or 5 years, then we got sent out 2020, and so that's pretty much how long we've been there and what's happened.
Right.
But as far as
So how far? What year was it when you showed up to the Potter's house?
man, I don't even, honestly, I wouldn't even be able to
Right,
tell.
right, right. So you
I
got
would have to ask. I think it was 2000. Let's see, because it's 2025 right now. We've been saved 10 years,
mm,
so it'd have to be 2000. I would say 2014.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
What do you think? So you come into the church, Jeremiah Waker's preaching, and he's just pretty much reading your mail type stuff, right?
Yeah, he
So
was preaching a sermon called The Echo Chamber, and it was just about pretty much your life, how you grew up, the things that happened to you, and how you're kind of stuck in a cycle in your life. And that was pretty much exactly what me and my wife were going through. And you
but
know,
but before that, did you ever hear about God, or was it like that was your first time, or has anybody ever witnessed you before prior to that?
I can't say I ever got witnessed to by anybody. No, I mean, I hear a lot of stories about people saying, "Yeah, I got witnessed to by this person and that person."
Right.
I never got witnessed to until pretty much when I got saved in
Right.
jail.
But
That's when.
but really, like when you went to the church, it was your mom that invited you, right?
Right.
So it was not like someone here come to church, stuff like that.
No, it wasn't anybody. It was so when I got saved, and what got me to be saved was because I didn't grow up believing in God. I wasn't raised in church. My family wasn't raised in church or anything like that. They didn't teach me about God or anything. Um, but I was just, I was raised without a father, and so through my teen, when I got into my teen years, that's when we actually moved, and when we moved, we changed schools, and I think that's what really messed me up. And I started hanging out with different people. I had to make new friends, and so I made new friends. I made friends with these teenagers. They were in gangs, and so I started hanging out with these gangsters, and so from there, then I started hanging out. I was like 14, 15, and I'm hanging out with older guys, 18, 19, 20, and we're already drinking. We're drinking with these adults, and they're selling drugs, and we're doing drugs, and just getting involved in that lifestyle because I know now, but I was looking for acceptance or a father figure, guidance, type stuff. But
And so was it just you? Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have two little brothers and two older sisters. But my older sisters, I don't have a relationship with them because they're from my dad. My dad was in prison my whole life. So my two sisters, I met my first sister when I was 12, first time. I met my father when I was 12, the first time we got out of prison. And we hung out for like a year, and then he disappeared again, caught another case, violated.
And so were your parents like together, or just like how did that go? Like growing up, like your mom had you, and then was he like there, or he went to prison when you were very young?
No, he went to prison. I was a few months old, so I don't know. I was a baby, so he got a charge, stabbed somebody, and robbed a store and stabbed some guy outside the store, and so that was his first case. And he did 10 years or 12 years, whatever it was, and then got out. That's when I met him. Then he caught another dope. He caught a dope case on parole. And he got caught by the feds, the ounce of cocaine, and then so he did another. They gave him 30 years, and then he got out on parole again. Recently, and after another 10 years, and then he was out for a little bit and did another 5 years, and so that's kind of his cycle. His lifestyle that he lives. But
You met him at 12, and then moved to another neighborhood. And you're from here,
yeah,
right? You
from
said born and
San Antonio.
raised.
Yeah, born and raised San Antonio whole life. Never really lived anywhere else. But yeah, it was after we moved. Yeah, he was never in my life though. Anyway, but after we moved, then yeah, then that's when I had to make different friends. We moved schools, we moved areas. So I wasn't per se a bad kid. I wouldn't say I was. I wasn't. I wasn't like a geek or a nerd, but I wasn't involved in gangs or I wasn't doing drugs until we moved and changed schools and neighborhoods and things like that. Then I started getting involved with different kinds of people. And from there, from drinking and smoking and just doing all that, I moved out when I was 16 years old. I moved out of my mom's house, had a job, I got an apartment with a friend of mine, and it just got worse. And then I tried to move. When that didn't work out, of course, I had to move back with my mom, but there was no room for me there because she had let my brothers take over my rooms, and so.
And so did you? Did you have a relationship with your mom, or it was just like
Yeah.
you're already too older? And
No, my mom was a good mom, and she raised me good. She raised me with manners and respect, and she was a good parent. It was just me that I took. I made my own choices, and I decided to. A lot of people think a lot of the influence is from the home, but actually, the major influence on people's lives is actually who they hang out with. Their friends, their cousins. And that's what really got me was the influence from the neighborhood I was staying in, the people I was surrounding myself with. Because my mom, she didn't raise me that way, and she doesn't live that lifestyle. But it's just something that influenced me was the people that I was around in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And so from there, it didn't get better. It only got worse, and started doing heavier drugs. I was doing heroin, I was doing ice, which is meth for y'all that don't know.
Yeah.
And so I was doing all types of drugs. I was a drug addict, everything. And so it got to the point where I needed drugs. I needed some heroin. I needed some Xanax.
So you were doing all this at 16 already?
Or no, just fast forwarding now to about the age of 20
right.
something, 18. I was in and out of jail. And so through all that, there was probably little glimpses when I would go to jail and someone would talk to me about God here and there, and that's probably the only thing that I got. Not necessarily like a hardcore witness, but maybe somebody asking me what my purpose is or something
Right,
like
right.
that.
And all that time, like before that, before you got in your 20s, when you were like 12 and 14, 16, all that, did you ever like ask your mom about your dad? Or did you even think about like, what's up with my dad? Like, any of your friends, did they have their dads in their lives too, or no?
My friends, no, none of my friends. I had one friend. He was like my best friend, and he had his dad in his life, but he was the only one. And but the only reason why is because his mom was a Christian and they were married, you know. And so now that I think about it, maybe she was the only one that kind of witnessed to me, and she kind of did tell me like in Spanish, like Cris, necesitas ir a iglesia, and she would tell me that, and we would go to church with her, but we would just be talking with the girls and stuff, me and my friend. But that's the only friend that I had that actually had a father, a dad in his life. All my other friends, they were raised by their grandparents, because they didn't have neither one of their mom or their dad.
It was like normal to
So
everybody not having their dad. It was like,
yeah,
did you ever think about that? Like,
no, I didn't
did
think
you
about
not?
it.
Did it not care? Like, the reason I'm saying is because like I grew up like similar in the streets and all that, but like I was telling some girl that we had on here too. Like, I wonder if like with you, you're just so caught up in the lifestyle, the drugs and all that, like you don't even think about your parents anymore. Was it like
Yeah,
that?
I would think about I would because that lifestyle makes you selfish. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
makes you like heartless. You live that kind of lifestyle, and I really hit the bottom. I made a choice or a decision to sell my soul actually to the devil, and that's kind of like when, for me, my life started going downhill because I didn't know if it was real or not. I didn't believe in God, like I said. So I listen to a lot of rap music, hear them talk about that. Let me give it a try. And so I just said a prayer to the devil, and the next morning I woke up. I didn't feel different or anything, so I went to the corner store. I bought 6 lottery tickets, and I said, if they're all winners, I'll know that this is a real thing. They were all winners, so I was like, oh wow. So like, what are the odds of that? So I was like, wow, I guess my soul's gone, and I guess I'm living for the devil, and I guess God is real and the devil's real. So, but like after that, I was doing good. I was partying, I was making money, selling drugs, and women and all that, and then but just after a while, the devil was just asking me to do more stuff and more stuff, and I was just like, this is too much, man. Like, I'm not gonna be doing all this, like, and I was reading people's palms, I was reading people's auras, telling them their past. I was involved in all types of demonic stuff like that, and so I would hear the devil speak to me. He would tell me I had to stay on drugs and I couldn't have love, I couldn't have a family. And so I stayed on drugs, and that's the way I lived my life. And like I said,
How old were you at the time when
I was
you
about
did
I was about
that?
in my teens, 19, 20, 21, something like that, maybe around that time.
And so did any of your friends like were they mess with that stuff, or it was just
No,
like
no, just something I did, and even I told my friends that night when I said the prayer, I told them I'm gonna say a prayer to the devil at this time. If y'all want to join me, y'all can. They looked at me like, "What's wrong with
tripping?
you? Like, you're crazy, bro." Like, I was like, "Whatever." So I did it, but it was actually that actually drew me to God, because I knew that Jesus was real, because the devil was real, and I saw who I was becoming. Like, I was becoming worse. Like, I was living in the Alazan courts, and like I was prostituting women in the courts, selling dope, and I just didn't care. I didn't care about them. They had kids, and I didn't care if they didn't have groceries. Hey, you need to go make some money. You got to pay for this dope. And just the person I was becoming, like, I was starting to be disgusted with myself, and how selfish I was, and I didn't care about anybody. I ended up robbing my stepdad for thousands of dollars of his jewelry, and he's did nothing but try to raise me and be there, but not there in my life, but tried his best to support me,
Right.
and he didn't have to. And I turned around and robbed this guy, and I was just becoming real disgusted with who I was as a person. And so I started to think like, man, if this is the life that the devil gives me, and I was going so far down, like I ended up at the end of it, I was literally homeless. I didn't have nowhere to stay.
Hmm.
I remember sleeping in the ditches with the homeless people one night, and I remember seeing the sunrise and telling them, man, this is the life. And they looked at me like, you're stupid, like you're crazy.
Really?
And they said, and I said, yeah, you're right, man. This life sucks. And I didn't have anything to my name. I got thrown out of this house. I was just living with chicks, and they got thrown out, and I didn't have no clothes. I didn't have a penny to my name, anything. And so I managed to come up on, some dope or something. And I ended up getting stopped by the cops, and I was on the run for like a year. I was using a fake name. I said, look, man, I'm not going to run. I'm tired already. I just want to go to jail. And so it was that point when I turned myself in, I was already thinking about God. Like I was already thinking, like, what if Jesus, would forgive me? And so when I went to jail, there was a guy, and he told me, what if God? And I didn't tell him anything about what I was doing. I just said, I think it's the devil that put me in jail. And he said, what if it's God? What if it's God? And I was like, all right, let me try it. And so I just said a simple prayer in my cell, and I don't know if you're real. I don't know if you would accept me. I don't even know if I have a soul. I don't even know if I could do this. But I'm willing to try it. And I know I got to change the way I live. I know I'm far from being good, far from being right. And I don't know anything about God, but I know I don't live right. And so I just said a simple prayer, and I woke up and I was different. Like I passed out, I woke up and I was changed. Like
In jail.
In jail, I didn't talk the same. When I woke up, I didn't think the same. I didn't want to do the same things. I didn't even cuss anymore. I just woke up. I didn't cuss. And before, it was just.
And how old were you at that time?
Changed. I think I was about 19 or 20. I want to say.
Okay. You were still young.
So I was 19, 20, like 20, 19, 20. 22 is like kind of like in the range where I went through all that, and then I got saved in jail. But it was when I came out of jail that.
And where was your mom and all that during all this?
No, she was always there. She never told me not to come home. She never told me. I always had a place to stay, but I wanted to live the way I wanted to live. So she was a good mom. She was never.
But like they seen you and all that, like when you're all messed up. What would they tell you? What would she tell you when she saw you all messed up and stuff like that? No. Or you wouldn't really bring it around?
No, well, I couldn't be there if I was going to be.
Okay, yeah.
So that's why I lived in the street, So. But it was after all that when I got out of jail, and I was living for God. I really got saved, and so when I got out of jail, I didn't want to be around all this temptation, and so I ended up moving with my grandma in Corpus, actually where I lived out there in Taft, and I was staying with my grandmother, and I didn't want to be around these people. I didn't want to be around any temptation. I wanted to live for God. But I didn't have any direction. I didn't have any guidance. I was going to a Baptist church. And little by little, I just started, I just drink one beer. I just smoke one cigarette. Next thing you know, I'm getting drunk. Next thing you know, I'm smoking, cigarettes. And next thing you know, I'm like, you know what? Calling a girl, come pick me up from Corpus. I'm partying with chicks. Started to sleep with chicks. Next thing you know, I'm just at the bars. I'm at the clubs. And so I wasn't all out. I tell people I wasn't a full-blown sinner. I was a good sinner now. I wasn't selling dope anymore. I wasn't robbing nobody. I wasn't in gangs anymore. I wasn't doing any of those things. I got a job. I went and found Jasmine, and I said, we got a house. I was working hard at a job. I was living a respectful life, a good citizen life, a good sinner life. And I'll read the Bible still, and I'll get convicted. And come on, God, give me a break. I'm a better person. You know what I mean? I'm a good guy now, And so, yeah, I'm sleeping around and still drinking. I'm still smoking, but a better person, And but I knew I wasn't right with God, and so I stayed living that life, man, for I want to say about a year or so. And actually, it came to a point to where I wanted to be right with God, and I wanted to stop drinking and stop smoking, and but I couldn't, And I was just talking to a brother right now. We were hanging out, and I was saying him I was whacked out. Like I would be drinking with my dad, and I would tell him, "Let's pray for the beer," and he would say, "Chris, that's not right, man. Like you're messed up." And but I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any direction, and so
it was kind of like you wanted. I wanted to. You wanted to be saved, but you just didn't know.
I didn't have the right guidance and direction. So then Jasmine too and her friend, I would try to teach them about the Bible. Come on, we're gonna have a Bible study. I'm gonna teach y'all about the Bible, and they would be smoking blunts, while I'm trying to teach them about the Bible. They don't want nothing to do with God, They were sinners. So I would still take my wife. I would take Jasmine to church, hungover, and we would go to church, and so it was actually the night on her birthday where she was 21, 22. I was 23. And it was that night I was just tired of fighting. I couldn't get free. I remember going to the Baptist church, pray with me. I want to be saved. I want to stop drinking. And they're looking confused, like, what do you mean? God loves you. You're saved.
Yeah,
You're gonna
yeah,
go to
yeah.
heaven. I'm like, no, I'm not living right. I'm sleeping around, I'm drinking, I'm smoking. And they just looked at each other confused. And I remember after that, I was just like, you know what? We're partying on her birthday.
Nice. So you really got saved when you were in jail.
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Yeah,
And so I was just like, I wanted to be free, but like the Bible says, when you sin, you become a slave to that sin. So literally a slave to my sin. I couldn't stop, and we were partying on my wife's birthday. And then, that night I just made a choice, like in my heart, I made a choice. You know what? I'm going to go all the way back because, I was holding back. I wouldn't, like I said, I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't robbing. And that night I made a choice inside of me. Like, I'm going to go all the way back to my old life. Like, I'm not holding back anything. Like, I'm not going to play like this, trying to live for God stuff, trying to stop, I'm going to go all the way back to my old life. Like, I'm done. And I remember feeling like everything, like I guess this, like that demonic spirit, like coming back to me, all the anger and rage, and then
so you made like a choice, like I'm gonna do
yeah,
this.
in my heart, like, you know what, like I'm done.
Wow.
I'm done trying
Yeah.
to live for God, like trying to. I wanted to, but I just like I didn't have the guidance. I didn't. I was a slave to my sin. I was just so involved in it already, just. And so that's the night. Then me and Jasmine, we ended up going to a store, and she got in the car with me, and I was going like 100 something miles an hour on San Pedro. I crashed into the pole on Hildebrand, San Pedro, and that's when she died. She died on the scene. She died on the operating table, and I was on life support for a whole month. Dying on life support, and I didn't know what happened. I woke up handcuffed to the bed. What's going on? You need to calm down. You're going to prison after this. You hurt somebody really bad. You were drinking and driving. Oh, this is a joke. You need to let me out of here. No, no, it's not a joke. As an investigator, you're going to jail after this. You caught a felony case, intoxication, assault, and if she dies, you're going to be in more trouble. And so I was like, wow, I can't believe this. I'm going back to jail. Like, so I just went back to sleep, whatever. And so a few weeks later, after being in the hospital, Jasmine comes in and she tells me like, hey, and she's crying like, I gave my life to Jesus, and I'm going to live for God. And I made my choice, and if you don't want to live for God, like we're not gonna be together. I can't be with you. And me, I'm crying, she's crying, and it's just like, because I knew the truth. She wasn't saved, she wasn't a backslider, but I knew like the way we were living was wrong, and so I knew in me like, I know I need to get right with God, but I was blaming God. Like, it's God's fault. Forget God. Why did he let this happen to me? But it was my sin, that got me into the situation I was in. A lot of people try to blame God, but it's the sinful life that they were living. There was sin in the world. And so I made that after I talked with her and I was fighting with God. I was doing worse and worse every day. And here's the doctor, he's going to die. He's not looking good. He's doing worse. And I knew inside of me, though, I'm like, man, if I give my life back to Jesus wholly, fully, he'll give me a second chance. He'll heal me, And so I finally just surrendered all to God. I said, okay, God, whatever you want me to do, I'll go to church faithfully. Like, I'll get married. I'll do everything. I'll stop everything. Just, give me a second chance. And boom, just like that. The next morning, I said that prayer that night. Next morning, the doctors came in. Yeah, we can't explain it. It's a miracle. He's fine. And so we lost everything. I had to live with my mom. She lived with her mom. And we lost it all. We lost our house, our car. We couldn't work for like almost a whole year, and we were like out of it. I was living with my mom, her mom. We couldn't take a bath. We couldn't change our clothes. We had to lay in bed, for almost 4 or 5 months,
So you break anything or?
Yeah, broke a femur, ankle, plates and screws and metal, all my ribs, my back, my face. Everything was broken, man.
Wow.
But the Bible says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but to lose his own soul, And so that night it was the opposite. I lost the world. I lost everything that I had, but I didn't lose my soul, And that night, boom, we crashed into the pole. She dies. I'm dying. We didn't have time to say, God, forgive me of my sins. And we probably weren't thinking about God. And she died on the scene. And so I'm dying. I'm not thinking about God. And I don't remember anything. And so we could have went straight to hell, but because of God's grace and God's mercy, you know, and people don't see that as mercy, you know, but really it is. You know, I went through all that, but God gave me a second chance, you know, to do His will, you know, and live for Him.
Right.
And so it was through all that, and that's when I was living with my mom down the street from the church. She lives on Wayside, and it's right there. And so she's the one who kept telling me to go to the Potter's house, and so that's how I ended up hopping into church. You know what I mean? And
Wow.
getting there and everything. And so
Wow. So okay, now you come into the church, and so you were saved. Were you saved when you went there? Kind of.
yeah.
Yeah. You were. And then so what happens? Right. You come to church, and then what did you think? Have you ever
Um,
heard? Did you ever hear about the church before you got
no,
there?
no, no. And I seen the sign, and I was just like, "That's a dumb sign. I don't know. I don't. Looks like a boring church." And like I said, my mom was always bugging me to go, and she never went to church. But yeah, I knew that was the first sign. Like this is where, because when he was preaching, it was like for me, and I knew I was called to preach. I knew God had told me to preach. So I talked to Pastor the first day when I showed up. I talked to him and Jeremiah. I told him I was called to preach, and he told me they disciple and it's free. And I said, free? That's the magic word. And so I stayed there because I was going to another church and they had like a program or something, $300 and a free discipleship. Okay, well, stay here. And so I stayed there. And later on, when we ended up getting married, and this is what kind of like really made me understand, like this is for sure where I need to be. I found out I was going to get married. Brother Eddie told me, well, I used to know a Chris Boteo, and it turns out my uncle was going to the Marbach church when it was small, you know, long, long ago. And my uncle was going there, and I didn't even know that, you know. And so my uncle got murdered in 1991, in 1990. My mom was pregnant with me in the back seat, and they went to go do a drug deal. Him and my dad came back to the car. A guy comes out, shoots him 5 times in the head, and empties the whole, you know, handgun on him. And they shoot my dad. They stab my dad. They're trying. There's guys surrounding the car, trying to kill everybody in the car. My mom's pregnant with me in the back seat, and so you know later on I get away, which my dad ends up starting the car getting away. So, but my uncle dies, and so but she named me after my uncle Chris Boteo. But it turns out that my uncle was a part of that church, and a lot of people know him, you know. And Brother Eddie used to look up to him, and my uncle would be street preaching, and so
Wow.
it was like, wow, like I didn't know that. I didn't know what church he went to, and I didn't even. I had heard like that he kind of wanted to be a preacher, but that's all that. I didn't know what church he went to or anything like that. And it turns out that God placed me in the fellowship where my uncle, was saved in the same fellowship, and not only that, but I was named after him, you know, and we both backslid. You know, he didn't make it. You know, he got murdered. We both backslid at the age of 23, and he got murdered, and I died at the age of 23. I mean, I almost died, but God gave me a second chance, and so it's kind of, it was like a real like, wow, like this is for sure like God putting me like where I need to be, and so just another like confirming moment for me, you know.
Wow. So okay, you're saved there in the church, and then tell us about because now you're pastoring, right? So tell us a little bit how that started. Like when did you desire to do that? Because you say you knew you were called to preach,
Yeah,
but
the whole
what was it for you? Like, you know what, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. What made that for you?
the whole time, man. When I made that decision, it was like first when I made it in jail. I don't know. I was just one day, some guy told me to pray and ask God what He wants me to do, and I just went to my bunk and I prayed, and God told me that's what He wanted me to do. You know, He told me to build a church and preach the gospel, and so I knew, like, okay, I got to build a church. I got to preach the gospel. And I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know where I was going to get the money. I didn't know any of that. I just wanted to do what God wanted me to do, and so it's always been, you know, I wasn't one of those guys like, oh, I don't want to go preach. I don't want to do the will of God. I've always wanted to do the will of God. Like I've always wanted to. It's always been my desire because, and the more like after the car accident, because I told God I'll do whatever you want me to do. So it was like a more, and I owe Him my life because I should be dead. You know, my wife should be dead, and so yeah, that's pretty much it's always been burning in my heart,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right,
to
right,
do the will of God.
right. Wow. So okay, tell us tell us about the church. What you thought about the church when you first came in? Because you already like the preaching, right? But tell us,
Yeah.
everything going on, like
Yeah.
all that. Tell us. I want to hear a little bit about that,
So
discipleship and all that.
yeah, I didn't know what discipleship was. I've never heard the word repent. I didn't know what that word meant. A lot of the words I didn't know any of those words, and so I think all the Bible that I had read was like Matthew only, and so I didn't know a lot of the words. I didn't understand a lot of the stuff that was going on. But one thing I did know is that the people cared about me, and that's really what kept me was the people, the people that they really loved me. They cared about me and my wife. Eric, he was a young man. I don't know how. I think he was like 18 or 19, and him specifically, he would come pick me up from my mom's house down the street. He would put my walker in the car, help me in the car, bring me to church. He would help me out of the car, put my walker, walk me inside, help me get seated. And he would even go pick up Jasmine on the other side of town. Sometimes he would pick both of us up, drive all the way over there. That'll be like an hour and a half back and forth to the church, and pick me up and help us both out. And then afterwards, drop us both off. And he would take us out to eat. He would fellowship with us. We didn't have any money. We were broke. He would pay for us. And just that was like, wow, like I don't have nothing to give this guy, and he's a young man, he's a young guy, and he's doing all this. Why, So I really saw that a love, that people had there, and not just him, but there was a lot of other people. Felicia and her husband. We didn't have a place to stay. We're living with different parents, and far away, and we're trying to live for God. We were married already. After a few months, we got married, and we're still separated because we didn't have a place. And so Felicia and Brian, they told us, hey, God's been dealing with us for y'all to come move in with us. They were new converts, we were new converts, and so here we are living together. We're all living together, and but that day when we went to a Bible study, new convert Bible study, I heard the devil that day. I woke up. He's telling me, go back to your old life. Look at the life you're living. You're depressed. You're married. You're not even together. At least you were happy when you were doing drugs and popping bars and getting high. At least you were happy. Y'all were together. At least. I forget this, man. I'm going to Bible study. God's going to help us. And sure enough, I went to that Bible study, and that's when they approached me, a couple, and told me that. And so I called my wife. My wife was ready to give up. She was ready to give up. She was tired. She was like, I called her, what do you want? I was at Bible study. Okay, so what? Like, what happened? What do you want? And I told her, look, this couple wants us to move in with them. And she was already ready to give up. I was ready to give up. And so
Hey,
it was
so
really that.
before you keep on going, what does she think about whenever you got saved, whenever you started going to church? Because now she sees, because first she said she got saved, and then you started coming to the church, and then she's seeing you like really be saved. What does she think? Like, what was going on with her? Was she feeling like the whole church thing, or?
Oh yeah, well she had really gotten
Right,
had
right.
gotten saved, and so she already knew. Like she already made up her mind. I already made up my mind, and so she wasn't. I don't think it was a shock to her that because we were both living the same life now, And even before, when I was like I would say religious, she knew that something happened. She knew I was changed, because I didn't act the same, I didn't dress the same, I didn't talk the same. So she knew something happened. She knew God was real. So yeah, she's always been on board, the whole way. Really, she's always been. Of course, she was real rough, and because she was more of a sinner than me, because she'd never been to church, and me, I'm a backslider, so I kind of know something.
Yeah.
She's coming in raw, nothing,
Right.
coming from a lifestyle of just doing whatever she wants, and so for her it was a little bit harder, So for her it took a little bit longer for her to get certain stuff, but she was never like you know what, like I'm not down with going to church. She always wanted to go to church, and she always lived for God and stuff like that.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Continue what you were saying. She was already saying like she wanted to leave. Remember when you called her to? You said you called her and you're at Bible study.
Oh yeah,
Continue with that.
yeah, with Felicia and Brian. Yeah, so yeah, man. So it was at that point where we're ready to quit, and it was at that point where God came through, and at the right time. They say God doesn't always pay on Friday, but He always pays right on time. And it was right on time, and we ended up moving in with them, and got on my feet within, I don't know, probably like 2 months. I moved out of there and we got our own spot. And but it was that, it was the love from those people. Other people coming up to me and just telling me, you need anything, let me know. I'm here. If you need a ride to your appointments, your doctor's appointments, you need anything, and just people just loving us. Really, that's what kept me. Like I said, I didn't understand a lot of the preaching. I didn't understand a lot of that, and I never even heard a lot of that stuff. But it was actually the people that kept me. It was the atmosphere of love and fellowship, and just a genuine care for new people, and
Right.
sinners coming in, and so that's what kept us.
And so, how was your conversion when you come to church where you're like, all right, what these people do? Because I mean, whatever we do at the fellowship is a lot different from a bunch of the church, right? Street preaching, outreaching, doing this. How was all that? Was that like all that was new to you as well, right?
Yeah, I never seen street preaching. I've never seen outreach. I never seen none of that stuff. Yeah, so the church I was going to was a religious Pentecostal, weird kind of deal, running around and shouting and jumping up and down and just going into frenzies of singing and speaking in tongues. They were real weird. I didn't participate in none of that stuff, but they were real weird. And I knew it was weird. I was just like, I'm not doing none of that stuff, but I'll go to church there. It's a black church, really. And so yeah, coming in and seeing that, I mean, I thought it was all cool. I mean, me and my wife, we first street preached in Uvalde. We went on the outreach, and we were in crutches, man. We were in crutches, and we went to an outreach in Uvalde. I don't know how many months we were saved, a couple of months, maybe 2 months or 1 month. We went to Uvalde in our crutches. We were tired outreaching in our crutches, and we the first time we street preached was in Uvalde, and we enjoyed it. We liked it. We liked everything about the outreach. We liked everything about church.
Right,
We
right.
liked it all.
You think for you, because the way you grew up, your whole lifestyle, right? Not having your dad and just growing up and all the way. You think for you, like the reason you caught it is because it was something different. As far as like you come to the church and you're like, like for me, I think growing up, I always wanted like to kind of to be a part of something because I did the gangs and all that too, right? I didn't have my father, so
Yeah,
for me, whenever I saw them, like man, I want to do everything they're doing because this is
yeah.
different. Was it like something for you?
I felt like I digged it, like I liked it because it was so confrontational. I think I liked that
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah, yeah,
I liked I don't know if it's the right word, the aggression that's involved in it, or and the Bible says the kingdom of God suffer the violence take it
yeah.
by force. So I kind of liked that aspect of it. We were preaching in the streets, we were going downtown, we were confronting people about their sin, and just the preaching from pastor was just real confrontational, and I like that part because I mean the lifestyle I was come from, like, yeah, we were violent and we would say stuff, and that's just kind of, so to me it was kind of like the same kind of deal. That's the
Yeah,
way I related it in my mind. Like, yeah, we're doing the same thing. It's we're going hard for this, we're going hard for the streets, hard for gangs and selling dope, but now we're going hard for Jesus,
yeah, yeah,
and this is
yeah.
what we're doing now. And so we're still in the streets, we're still we're still talking to people, but now we're talking to people about different stuff, so that's what really, I guess I really related it like that. So it really, to me, it worked like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
so I
That's
like
cool.
being in the streets. I like going downtown. We go downtown preaching and confronting people and preaching to them, telling them about their sin, they need to
Right,
repent and all
right.
that. So
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so let's fast forward to okay, you and your wife, join ministry, and then so you get sent out to Sinton, right?
yeah,
First, tell us a little bit about that.
Sinton was good. When we got there, we couldn't find a building. Well, first of all, it was a lockdown, and then after COVID and all that, we finally got into a building, old tire shop. We transformed that place up into a church, and it was the only building that was there. We had a good start. First service we opened, we had visitors. We had a couple come, prayed with them, and they got healed. And we started to see, God build that church. And I don't know how many people we got up to, maybe like 16 people or something like that. I know there would be times when we had like 20 and stuff like that. But we were working with a good amount of people, and then just this guy sold the building. This guy bought the building and told us we got to move out like within a month. And so when we moved from there, we went to another building, and kind of like the same deal happened. We got it built up, and the same thing. People were coming, and the same thing. Well, we're gonna sell the building, and so in a month you got to move out, and so that happened. Year and a half, or whatever it was. Moved into the next building, and honestly, the people that we did see, we saw a few conversions, but for the most part, they were religious people. They were people that, oh yeah, we've always believed in God, and they didn't really, you know, have the goods, like they say. They didn't really have that genuine conversion experience. They were just like, yeah, it's the right thing to do. We go to church.
Right.
And so it wasn't really what we wanted to see. We wanted to see genuine conversions like us,
Right.
people from the streets, people raw sinners, people that didn't go to church, stuff like that.
How did you? How did Cincy come about? Getting sent out there.
Well, like I said, I moved out there with my grandma to Taft, and so when I first got to jail, I remember I moved out there,
Mm-hmm.
and so there was these kids out there, and I was like, a lot of these teenagers, they were like drawn to me, and so I would try to teach them about God and stuff like that, and so I've always had a burden for all those teenagers out there, so I always prayed for them. So when I started thinking about that area, originally I wanted to go to Calallen, and but pastor said there's a guy there already, so couldn't go there. So I said, okay, what about Portland? Yeah, Portland would be good. All right, so let's do Portland. Well, then they announced the guy to Portland in October. Well, they announced the guy to Portland. Oh, well, then you can't go there. You gotta go somewhere else. Man, there's no other bigger cities. Those places had like 30,000, 15, 20,000. Sinton was the most populated besides those, so I chose Sinton. So and yeah, so that's how that went. We were there, and then so after that period of time, it just wasn't hitting, it wasn't happening, and so I talked to pastor about moving to Calallen. I started going over there. We moved, and I started seeing what was going on in Calallen. It was like a lot of young people here. There's more life here. It's moving. It's growing. I think it'd be a good spot to come over here. And the guy was never there. He never went. The guy that pastor said there was a guy there, but he never got anything started. And so there was never a church there in the first place. So
And was it supposed to be from our fellowship?
yeah,
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah. So we ended up getting out there, and so when we got out there, I started believing God, all over again, believing God, and yeah, God started moving, man. We've been seeing people saved, families, genuine, conversions
Right,
this time,
right.
not religious people. We're talking about an alcoholic, there was for years an alcoholic, her kids getting saved, and another family, a woman and her kids getting saved, and these aren't religious people. They're not people that always went to church their whole life, or hey, I'm going to this church, but I'll come to your church. And that's kind of how it was in Sinton. We were like a backup church, like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I went to my church in the morning, but I'll go to your church at night. So it's not really what you want. You don't want religious people. You don't want people church hoppers and stuff like that. So now we're really seeing, genuine people that want to live for God, and they want to do the will of God. They want to hear from God, and something really happened in their life.
Right, 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 right. Wow. So what are some things that what are some things you want God to do? Or obviously you're in a new location, so He's already moving. But what do you want God to do, whether in ministry or in Calallen? Like, what are some things you want God to do, or even family members, unsaved family
Yeah,
members?
yeah. Well, naturally, I would like all my family to be saved. My brothers, my mom. Um, but as far as like ministry in the church, I mean, I would just like to see just more, just for God to keep doing, what He's doing, saving people and making Himself real, and I understand it to work takes time. God's building His church, and all those things happen. But it's one thing I would see. I just want to see more. I just
Yeah.
want to see more conversions. I want to see more lives changed. I want to see more people getting connected with God, building that relationship with God, and just same thing that happened in my life happened in them. What's happened in me. I want that same thing for families, for that city. For people all around. So
Right, right.
all I want,
Yeah.
to do what God wants me to do and build a church, preach the gospel.
Right.
That's it.
All right. If you could leave, any listeners who may be, going through the same thing you went through, grew up the same way, or even if they didn't, what would be some words, words of encouragement that you'll leave somebody?
Words of encouragement for like somebody that's
Yeah,
not saved.
yeah, anybody who's not saved, or maybe they're going through the same thing you went through, same background, or even not, even if
Yeah.
they don't have a,
For me,
criminal and all that, just
yeah. I mean, for me, I would say if you're not saved, I mean, you should try. You should at least try Jesus, because for me, that was my mind. I just said, well, I mean, I've never tried this before. I've tried a lot of things, but I've never tried Jesus. And let me try this and just see what happens. And so I would say if you would just at least try Jesus and commit, to surrendering your life and doing what He wants you to do instead of what you want to do. And when you make that choice and that decision, things begin to happen. I didn't know that that's what God would do. I didn't know God would change me. I didn't know God would take away all my addictions, and I didn't know He would give me joy and peace. I didn't know any of those things. But it's when I made that decision, what if? And I just began to think, and when I just decided to try and live a life for God, He changed me. And so you would just try Jesus and try a lot of things in this world, I'm sure. So try Jesus and see what He could do in your life, and He'll make Himself real to you. That's people that are, and if you're backslidden like me, I mean, it's not too late. You don't have to get into you don't have to go through a whole bunch of things in your life. Just repent, surrender, and get back right with God and do the will of God, and He'll bless you and help you.